If you're a Christian that pays attention to politics, you probably felt something is hard to admit out loud. You've watched people on your side use the Bible to say things that feel wrong. Maybe you're a conservative Christian and you've watched the faith get pressed into a service for a political agenda that has no more to do with cultural preservation than with anything Jesus said. Maybe you're a liberal Christian and you've watched the faith get pressed into service for a social program that treats the gospel as a mandate for whatever the progressive consensus currently requires. In both cases, you felt it. The faith you received, the one that was supposed to be about something transcendent, something that could not be co-opted by any political party, has been co-opted. And the people doing the co-opting are completely sincere. And that's what makes it really hard. What I want to argue today is that both versions of politicized Christianity are missing the same thing. Not just missing an emphasis or balance, missing the center. And the center is something specific, not a third political option, not a centrist Christianity, not a moderate position between the two. Something that predates both sides entirely, something that once you see it, makes the political argument inside the church look exactly what it is. Two sides fighting over a faith neither of them has actually examined at its foundation. Before I show you what each side gets wrong, I want to name what the alternative actually is. Because this is not a position that avoids extremism by being cautious or moderate. It avoids extremism because it's structurally balanced, held in place by two fixed points that can't be abandoned without destroying the whole. The position this channel argues from is not a middle ground in the ordinary sense. It's not the moderate between the conservative right and the liberal left. It's balanced in a more precise way, held equally between what has already happened and what is still to come. The first fixed point is in the past, the prior fulfillments of Christ, the specific historically confirmed and prophetically announced events that already occurred and are on the record. Isaiah 53, written and fulfilled, Daniel 9, declared and confirmed, all of them. Psalms 22, put on record 1,000 years before crucifixion existed, and then verified in the Passion account in terms that can't be explained by coincidence. These things happen. They were declared before they happened. The correspondence between declaration and event is verifiable. That fixed point can't be moved or revised because it is already history. Now, the second fixed point is in the future. The still coming consummation of the prophetic plan. The completion of what was announced. The millennial reign of the one whose identity was certified by the prior fulfillments. The final establishment of the kingdom that was declared before any of our current political arrangements existed. That fixed point is certain, not because we decided it, not because our tradition affirms it, but because the same prophetic record that was verified in the past announced it for the future. The certainty of what is coming is grounded in the certainty of what already came. The past was established precisely to create the space in which everyone willing can enter a future kingdom. The position lives between these 2 points, between fulfillment and promise. And it's not possible to lean more toward one than the other without losing something vital. Lean too far toward the past and you have a Christianity that is all memory and no living hope, a religion of what already happened, without genuine orientation toward the coming consummation. That's the conservative error. The past fulfillments become a tradition to preserve. The future kingdom becomes a vague afterthought, and the living tension between what was and what is to come collapses into cultural nostalgia. Lean too far toward the future, and you have a Christianity that is all project and no ground, a religion of what we are building toward without the verified past that makes the future certain. That's the liberal error. The coming kingdom becomes a human program of improvement. The past fulfillments become background devotion, and the living tension collapses into social idealism with biblical vocabulary. This also means the position is not defined by being between theological traditions either, between doctrinal conservatism and experiential liberalism, between Calvinist rigor and charismatic openness, between high church and low church. Doctrine, religious experience, tradition, and spiritual feeling are all things a religious or philosophical mind can produce entirely from within itself, without any transcendent input. A community can generate sophisticated theology from human reasoning. It can generate profound religious experience from human psychology. Neither requires a transcendent disclosure to validate it. The negative middle, the transcendent middle, is not between these things. It's between fulfillment and promise, between what the prophetic record already confirmed in history and what the same prophetic record still announces as coming. That is the only axis on which this position is located. And it is an axis that no amount of doctrine, experience, tradition, or idealism can substitute for, because it requires both a verifiable past and a certain future, and the only source of both is the prophetic record itself. With that frame in place, let me show you what happens when each side loses it. Now, let me preface this by saying that I am not just dismissing politics altogether. I'm not dismissing conservative or liberal politics. I think they're very, very important for the regulation of society, but only for the regulation of society. And let me throw this out there too. As I say this, and I say this not to offend my liberal friends, but I am very conservative when I vote, but only when I vote. I am conservative in another way when it comes to Christianity, and I might add I'm liberal in a way that it comes to Christianity too, but both in ways that you don't really expect if drawing from the political tradition of each side. Let me start with a conservative Christian, and let me do it with genuine respect, because the instincts here are not wrong. The conservative Christian senses that civilization is not self-sustaining, that the moral order which makes human society livable was not invented by the current generation and can't be reinvented by the next one without catastrophic loss. That the family, the church, the nation, the accumulated wisdom of Western tradition, these are not arbitrary arrangements that progressive politics can redesign at will. He senses that something above the merely human has to anchor the social order, and the social order dissolves. He is right about all of that. But here's what happened. The political agenda came first. The conviction that tradition must be conserved, that the social order must be defended, that the moral inheritance of Western civilization must be protected, these convictions were in place before the Bible was opened in their support. And when the Bible was opened, it was opened selectively. The texts that support moral order, family structure, national identity, the authority of established institutions, these were lifted. The texts that do not fit, the prophet's fierce indictment of established religious and political power, the consistent theme of God working through the rejected and the outsider, the specific identity of Jesus as the one the institutional religion of his day found most threatening, these were set aside or softened. The result is a Christianity that functions as the spiritual wing of a cultural preservation project. God becomes the guarantor of the values the conservative already holds. Just because Jesus becomes the supreme exemplar of the moral order the conservatives want to defend. The Bible becomes the sacred text of a civilization rather than the prophetic record of a transcendent disclosure that cuts across every civilization, including the ones conservatives love. This is not Christianity. It is conservatism with a cross on it. And the people inside it are largely sincere. But sincerity does not change what it is. Now the liberal Christian, and again with genuine respect here, because these instincts are not wrong either. The liberal Christian senses that the faith has a profound orientation toward the poor, the marginalized, the excluded, that justice is not a peripheral theme in the Bible, but a central one, that a Christianity which is comfortable with power, indifferent to suffering, and aligned with the interest of the dominant class has missed something essential about the one who ate with sinners, touched lepers, and was executed as a political criminal. He senses that the faith makes demands on the social order, not just on individual souls, and that those demands cannot be reduced to personal piety while the structures that produce suffering go unchallenged. And he is right about all of this. But here's the same problem from another direction. The political agenda came first. The conviction that justice must be expanded, that inclusion must be widespread, that the preferential option for the poor must shape both personal ethics and social policy, these convictions were in place before the Bible was opened in their support. And when the Bible was opened, it was opened selectively. The texts that support justice, inclusion, and care for the vulnerable were lifted. The texts that do not fit the specific identity claims of Jesus, the exclusive and historically particular character of the prophetic record, the consistent insistence that what makes the faith different is not its ethical program, but its grounding in a transcendent disclosure that no human community generated, these were set aside or reinterpreted. The result is a Christianity that functions as the spiritual wing of a social improvement project. God becomes the guarantor of the justice the liberal already pursues. Jesus becomes the supreme exemplar of the compassion and inclusion the liberal wants to embody. The Bible becomes a resource for ethical reflection rather than the prophetic record of a transcendent disclosure that grounds the ethical demands in something outside the human community's own ideals. This is not Christianity either. It is liberalism with a cross on it. And the people inside it are also largely sincere. But sincerity does not change what it is. Now here's the precise thing both versions share, stated as plainly as possible. Both have taken Christianity as received. Its doctrines, its ethics, its traditions, its institutional forms, and pressed it into service for a political program that was already in place. Both have read the Bible to confirm what they already believed rather than to discover what the Bible is actually about. And both have lost or never found the one thing that made Christianity categorically different from every other religion or ethical system or political philosophy in human history. Every religion has moral teaching. Every civilization has a tradition worth preserving. Every serious ethical framework has an orientation toward justice. The conservative Christian's moral order and the liberal Christian's social justice are both things that thoughtful people in many traditions have pursued without any reference to Jesus or the Hebrew prophets. They are not wrong. They are not sufficient to distinguish Christianity from anything else. Now, what distinguishes Christianity? What has always distinguished it from every other religious and ethical tradition is not ethics, nor is it religious ideas or concepts, not its moral order, not its institutional history. It's the specific, historically verifiable, supernaturally attested prophetic record. The prior declarations of the Hebrew prophets made centuries before the events they described, confirmed in history in the person of Jesus of Nazareth in ways that no human community could have engineered. That record is not a conservative value. It is not a liberal value. It is a fact claim, a verification problem. Either the declarations came from outside the human community, from a God who can name the end from the beginning, or the most sustained and precise coincidence in the history of human literature requires explanation. That question is not answered by defending tradition. It is not answered by pursuing justice. It requires actually examining the record. And both sides have stopped examining it, if they ever started, because both sides already know what Christianity is for. The conservative knows it's for preserving the moral order. The liberal knows it is for building the just society. Neither is asking whether the prophetic record that grounds all of it is actually what it appears to be. So what is the alternative? Not a moderate position between conservative and liberal Christianity. Not a balanced Christianity that takes a little from each side. Something categorically different. Something that predates both sides and is accountable to neither. The messianic, prophetically centered Christianity begins not with a political program, but with the prophetic record itself. With Isaiah 53, written 7 centuries before the crucifixion, describing in specific physical detail the resurrection, suffering, death, and vindication of the servant. Detail so particular that their correspondence to the gospel narrative is either supernatural disclosure or inexplicable coincidence. Or another really prominent one that I always use is Psalms 22, written 1,000 years before crucifixion existed, as an execution method containing the specific language of the Passion account. And another one I always mention is Daniel 9, containing the chronological announcement of the arrival and violent death of the Anointed One in datable terms confirmed in history. Or Micah 5:2, naming the birthplace, with Zechariah 11, naming the amount and the destination of the betrayal price. With Zechariah 9:9, describing the manner in the entry into Jerusalem 5 centuries before it happened, and on and on and on and on. This is not devotional material. This is a verification problem. These documents predate the events they describe. The correspondence between what they declared and what happened is specific enough to require explanation. And the explanation the prophetic tradition itself offers, that the God of Israel is the one who names the end from the beginning, who puts his announcements on the historical records before the events they describe, who certifies the identity of his Messiah, not by institutional authority or community consensus, but by prior declaration confirmed in history, is the explanation that makes Christianity not a religion like other religions, but a verifiable claim about a God who discloses himself from outside the human community altogether. Messianically, prophetically centered Christianity takes that claim seriously. It reads the New Testament the way the New Testament reads itself, as the confirmation of the fulfillment of a prior announcement, not as the founding document of a new religion. It treats Peter at Pentecost as a prophecy fulfillment argument constructed from 3 prior oracular texts. It reads Paul's according to the scriptures in 1 Corinthians 15 as the load-bearing epistemological grounding of their creed, not as a devotional footnote. It reads Jesus's "He who has ears to hear" as a threshold marker at moments of messianic identity disclosure, not as a general call to attentiveness. And it reads, the political arguments inside the church, conservative and liberal, as what they are. Two communities using the vocabulary of faith to authorize programs they would hold anyway, neither of which is grounded in the specific, publicly checkable, historically confirmed prophetic record that is the only thing that gives Christianity its authority over any program at all. Now, why this changes the political argument? The prophetically, messianically considered Christian is not apolitical. He lives in the world. He votes. He cares about justice and order and the welfare of his neighbors. But his politics flow from a different ground than either side is standing on. And that ground changes everything. He cannot be a conservative Christian in the standard sense because the prophetic record does not sanctify any human tradition. And the tradition the conservative wants to preserve was itself built by fallible people in specific historical circumstances, carrying the blind spots of those people and those circumstances. The prophetic record does not endorse Western civilization. It announces a Messiah whose reign cuts across every civilization, including the ones conservatives love, and whose arrival was consistently rejected by the established religious and political institutions of his day. He cannot be a liberal Christian in the standard sense either, because the prophetic record does not sanctify any human program of improvement. The justice the liberal wants to build is a human concept generated from within the human community's own ideals, subject to the same revision and replacement as every other human ideal. The prophetic record does not endorse the progressives' consensus. It announces a Messiah whose kingdom is not built by human hands, whose coming does not depend on the success of any social movement, whose authority does not require the current generation's approval, and whose definition of justice is not derived from the community that is trying to implement it. What the prophetically, messianically centered Christian has that neither side has is a ground that was established before any current political arrangement existed. A past that is genuinely stable. Not a human tradition that has to be defended against revision. A prophetic record that was put on the historical record before it happened and can't be revised because the events it described have already occurred. And the future that is genuinely identified. Not a human ideal that keeps being redefined, but the reign of the one whose identity was certified in advance and whose coming was announced before any current political program was formulated. That is not a political position. It is the ground from which a political position can be evaluated without being co-opted by it. This is addressed to two specific people. The first is the conservative Christian who loves the faith and has watched it get reduced to a cultural war, who has sat in churches where the sermon was indistinguishable from a political rally, who has felt correctly that something essential was being lost, that the transcendence the faith was supposed to carry was being traded for a temporary political alliance. You were right to feel that. What was lost is not conservatism. What was lost is the prophetic ground that gives the faith its authority. And that ground is available, not as a tradition to be conserved, as a record to be examined. Now, when you go into your conservative church, don't balk at this. It goes a lot deeper than that statement might imply. I want you to take note of how often messianic prophecy is mentioned in the sermons that your pastor is delivering, and how much of it is on the lips of those sitting in the pews as they mill around and they talk about religious things. and you will discover that it's gone. It's mentioned every now and then politely, respectfully, like a footnote. But conservatism is all about the doctrines, the ideas of Christianity, not the prophetic ground. Now, the second is the liberal Christian who loves the faith and has watched it get reduced to a social program, who sat in churches where the gospel was functionally identical to the platform of the party, who has felt correctly that the faith was being used rather than received, that the transcendence it was supposed to carry was being pressed into service for an agenda that has been decided in advance. You were right to feel that too. What was lost is not the justice impulse. What was lost is the prophetic ground that gives the justice impulse its authority, the ground that makes it more than the current generation's preferences dressed in biblical language. Now, in the liberal church, like I say again, it goes much, much deeper in this. The liberal church is on a program to delete the supernatural entirely from Christianity. This is why, the same way, you'll go into a liberal churches and you will hear nothing of messianic prophecy, because it suggests something too strong that just grates against them, which is that God is in control, that the transcendent God is in control of history, that it's going to decide what is good and what is not liberals. Neither of you needs to become the other. Neither of you needs to abandon what you care about. But both of you need to find what you care about is actually grounded transcendently. And the grounding is not in the political tradition you received. It's in the prophetic record you have not yet examined on its own terms. Now, this messianic-centered Christianity is not a new thing. It's the oldest thing. It's what Peter was doing at Pentecost when he constructed his entire argument from 3 prior oracular texts and concluded, God has made him both Lord and Christ. It's what Paul was doing in Romans when he named the prophets before he named Jesus, and insisted twice in 3 verses that the creed is only the creed is if it is grounded in prior scripture. It's what Jesus was doing when he said, he who has ears to hear at every moment of messianic identity disclosure, announcing what he was revealing was grounded in a prior declaration that the vast majority would not receive. It is the faith before either side got hold of it. Now here's what the faith actually offers each side. Not as a compromise between them, but as something that goes further than either of them has been willing to go. The conservative instinct is right. What worked? What is ancient? What is proven? These things matter. But the conservative has not been conservative enough. If he followed that instinct all the way back, past the Enlightenment, past Christendom, past the 4th century, past the patristics, past every human tradition that called itself Christian, he would arrive not at a tradition, but at the prophetic record itself. The thing that predates every tradition. The thing that cannot be reduced to a tradition because it is not a human construction at all. It's a disclosure that arrived from outside the human community and was proved in history. That's what actually worked. It worked not because it was a good idea, but because it demonstrated, in the only way anything can be demonstrated from outside the human community, that the God of Israel exists and names the end from the beginning. The past, the conservative is trying to conserve, the golden age, the better civilization, the moral inheritance was itself partial, broken, and eventually consumed. It also produced slavery, empire, and the consistent persecution of the prophetic tradition that certified the Messiah. There is nothing in that past worth pining for as a replacement for the prophetic word. The prophetic word is what turns the conservative's affection for what is ancient away from everything the world can produce as a substitute, toward the only thing that is genuinely past and genuinely stable and genuinely worked, because it was put on the record before it happened and confirmed in history when it did. Now, the liberal instinct is also right. The future can be better. The impulse toward genuine equality, genuine peace, genuine human flourishing, these are not wrong. But the liberal has not been liberal enough. He has stopped his projection of the future at the edge of what human beings can build themselves. And the history of purely human projects aimed at equality and justice is a history of murder, genocide, and war under deified men who did not believe in any God except themselves. Every utopia built by human hands has required the elimination of the people who did not fit. The liberal wants a future of genuine peace and genuine justice, but he keeps trying to build it from the same materials that have always failed. There is a future that delivers what the liberal impulse has always been reaching for. The millennial reign of the one whose identity was certified by the prophetic record, whose kingdom is not built by human hands, whose justice is not derived from the community trying to implement it. The future is not a human project. It is an announced destination. It was declared before any current political program was formulated, and it is the only future that is genuinely fixed, not endlessly redefined, not perpetually receding, not dependent on the success of any movement or the goodwill of any government. The messianically prophetic Christian is not the moderate middle between these two. He is not the person who takes a little tradition from the right and a little idealism from the left and calls it balance. He's in a different position entirely. Not the imminent middle, not the carnal compromise between the two human programs, but the transcendent alternative to both. He refuses both, not by balancing them, but by going past both of them to the only ground neither can reach. The transcendent disclosure of a God who proved himself in history, whose past is not a human tradition, but a prior declaration confirmed in events, whose future is not a human project, but an announced reign that no human community designed or can prevent. Conservative Christianity made the faith a culture. Liberal Christianity made the faith a program. The messianically prophetic Christian receives it as what it always was, the verification that the God who names the end from the beginning disclosed himself in history, certified his Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth, by prior declaration, and announced a future that makes every human political program look like what it is, a temporary arrangement of fallible people trying to do from the inside what can only come from the transcendent outside. That record is in the documents, and it can be examined. The correspondence between what the prophets declared and what happened in history is available to anyone willing to look, not as a devotional exercise, not as a confirmation of what they already believe, but as the only thing that could end the political argument inside the church, because it is the only thing that is not a human construction of either side. The faith before either side got hold of it is still there. And it's always been there, not in the middle between conservative and liberalism, in the place neither side has looked. Above both of them, outside both of them, prior to both of them, in the record that was put down before any of us arrived and was confirmed in history before any of our political arrangements existed. That is where this channel begins. Only what Moses and the prophets said would come.